District 115 Board of Education on May 14th, 2013. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Here.
Mr. Edson? Mr. Schreiber?
Here.
Mr. Powers?
Here.
Mr. Mormon?
Here.
Mr. Burgener?
Here. Guess that means it's back to me, right? First item on the agenda is the President's report. My first one, so please indulge me. Last month on election night, 3 of our long-serving board members participated in their final regular meeting here. Those members were John Scribner, Board Vice President Jim Carey, and long-serving Board President Sharon Golan. I personally learned a great deal from each of them and feel privileged to know them. When I reflect on what was accomplished during the terms of the retired members, I'm amazed at what was achieved during their tenure. I'm confident that this board has been left with a solid foundation on which to build and heading in a very positive direction. Tonight, I'd like to welcome new board members Ted Mormon, John Powers, and Dave Schreiber. In order to meet state requirements to have all new board members seated within 28 days of the election, each was sworn in at or before a special meeting of the board that was held last Tuesday. Each has also already spent a significant amount of time ramping up through their participation in an orientation with the administration, through a long session with the Illinois Association of School Boards last week called Starting Right, and a Saturday morning education session in which board legal procedures and compliance were presented from an outside law firm. Following the swearing in of new members, the newly seated board voted to elect its new leadership. Leadership positions included board secretary, to which Nicki Snoblin was elected. Dick Block was elected to serve as the board's vice president, and I was elected to serve as the board's president. Our focus going forward will be, as it always has been, on our students and on providing each of them individually and collectively with the best education and overall high school experience possible. If we're successful, we will earn the desired and deserved trust of the communities that we serve. But more importantly, we will contribute in a meaningful way to sending hundreds of kids off to bright futures equipped to successfully handle the challenges that they will face. I look forward to working with each of you. I'm grateful to have your confidence and the opportunity to serve in this capacity. Thank you. Just as a order of regular business, the board met prior to this in closed session for purposes of discussing matters related to the appointment, employment, compensation, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district. Board action during closed session is prohibited and none was taken tonight. That completes my President's report. I'll turn it over to Mr. Simic for the Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Burgener, and I will defer initially to Mr. Thiel, who is serving as interim principal at the high school. I'd like to take a moment publicly to thank Mr. Thiel for his work and pass on the fact that the staff has a great deal of confidence in his leadership, states so repeatedly, and that we certainly have a lot of responsibility that's been placed upon you over these 31 years, but more so now than perhaps ever.
Thank you. Just want to give some updates. The last few weeks have been a busy few weeks at the high school. I'm going to start out with April 16th. We had our annual Student Service Recognition Award night, and in that evening we had 10 different student individual recognition awards that were awarded for that night, as well as 18 different student awards that were for organizations and clubs. We had 36 presidential volunteer awards, and that was 36 of them that were at the bronze level, which is 100 service hours, which is quite a bit of work. And then we had 4 students that received the silver medal, which was 175 hours of service work. We had 5 students that were at the gold level, which is 250 hours of service work. So a lot of service work done in the school and the community, and we're really proud of these students for their efforts. Testing, we had the Prairie State ACT test. It was April 23rd and 24th, and our junior class was outstanding in attendance. We had a few students that we finished up 2 weeks later with makeups, and all juniors have completed the Prairie State ACT test. AP testing started May 6, and we're finishing up this week. We have 432 students that are taking AP exams, and we're proud to say from the PSAT, we have 6 National Merit finalists, 1 National Achievement Award selection student, and we also received a letter from ACT last week that we had a student that scored a perfect 36 on the ACT. All very great accomplishments for Lake Forest High School. The spring play was the first week of May. It was Zeusical. It was very lively, very colorful, and very entertaining. Got great reviews. The cast, the directors, and the audience were very excited with the play. It was very entertaining. The art department had its annual art display in the Lake Forest Library, public library, and if you had a chance to go see that, there's some wonderful art displays throughout the art curriculum, the ceramics, paintings, drawings, sketches, just fantastic artwork. Our sports, our spring sports, our boys baseball, volleyball, and lacrosse team are all starting the playoffs this week. Our boys track team is starting sectional play this weekend. Our tennis team was the Lake Division champions, and they're starting sectionals this week. Our boys, girls water polo, and girls badminton team has had their season concluded. Our girls soccer, lacrosse, and softball team are all starting the playoffs as well this week. And our girls track team has qualified 9 girls to the state meet, which is quite an accomplishment, and we're anticipating some medals coming back from Eastern Illinois down from the state meet with the girls track. Last week was Depression Awareness Week in the high school, and some of the highlights were on Monday, Dr. Renicky from Northwestern University, who is not a stranger. He worked with us last year at the high school as well as the community. He spoke to students about stress management at home, school, personal life. Did a very nice job, spoke to students again during the lunch hours. We had good attendance during those talks. On Wednesday, Dr. Karen Schwartz from Johns Hopkins spoke to the staff about depression symptoms with adolescents. And again, that was very well attended during the lunch hours by our staff. Erica's Lighthouse had a panel there that spoke to the students during lunch hours so they could ask questions and just hear the panel about depression and suicide. We've had them in several times over the years. They're an excellent organization talking to students about those topics. And then we rounded it out on Friday with some kind of de-stressing activities. We had yoga come in and some de-stressing activities in the dance studio for students to kind of have some fun and just learn some techniques on how to unwind. Upcoming, we've got prom on Saturday, this Saturday, May 18th. We have over 800 students that will load the buses at Lake Forest High School around 6:15, drive to Chicago to the Chicago Marriott, and they'll have dinner and dancing till about midnight, and then we bus them back. It's a great event. Students have just a great evening down there. The 21st, May 21st, we have our first concert, which is orchestra. The 23rd will be the band concert. On the 28th, we'll have the choral concert. And then on the 29th, we have our honors night. And then we go into finals first week of June. And then June 6th, we have our senior party on the front lawn from 5:30 to 8. And June 7th, we will have our senior breakfast from 11 to 12:30, and we'll take the seniors into the field house. We'll do a graduation rehearsal. And then on June 8th, we'll be on the front lawn at 2:30 for graduation.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel. And to add a couple things on to that, beginning with graduation, we have, thanks to Mr. Thiel and others, worked out a Plan B for graduation. So we vetted some ideas. Mr. Thiel and Ms. White worked on a number of ideas on what sort of options we might have to hold graduation on an alternative site, alternative days, and whatnot. And June 8th, rain or shine, hopefully shine. 74 and sunny is the forecast I've ordered. and we'll see if it comes through, given how the rest of the year is going, or has gone. Bring your umbrellas. So it should be great, but we do have a Plan B worked out. We will hold the graduation in the field house if necessary, with other viewing arrangements for friends and family. A lot of work gone into that. Graduation on the front lawn is, I also spoke with a group of students, and overwhelmingly from both them and the parents, there's a huge desire to have graduation on the front lawn and not anywhere else. Related to the principal search, I want to give an update on that as well. I met with the search consultant for the principal search, and she stated that very clearly this was going to be a recruited search, particularly because it is this late in the year. It is unlikely that good candidates are going to want to leave a situation that they have, that they like. Earlier in the year might have been different. And so essentially she said, if you don't have a candidate in place by the beginning of June, you'll probably be looking for one in January instead of this year, which puts us in a long-term holding pattern, which is not desirable. One of the other interesting things is that contrary to what I had hoped and what we experienced in Deer Path when we had an out-of-state candidate apply, she said you're looking for a mid-year candidate, or a mid-career candidate, typically between somewhere in their 40s or in their 50s, and those people are far less eager to leave their current retirement system and come to Illinois now that Illinois has so drastically changed its retirement. So our out-of-state candidate pool, I said it might happen, but it's a lot less likely than it would have been a couple years ago. We also have a survey that is going out to staff and to parents that we put together. I met repeatedly with our staff, talking to them about what they're interested in seeing, and they formed the basis of a survey that will go out to all of our parents. We'll also be posting, let me back up for just a moment. I met privately with 2 candidates, and I'm very pleased to pass on that these are 2 exemplary candidates. I think it's safe to say that these are industry leaders, and we would be happy to have them as candidates for a number of different positions. We're also posting a curriculum and instruction assistant superintendent. We're going to be repurposing some of our administrative talent from Dr. Cooley's unfortunate departure, her retirement. We're going to be directing some of those energies at curriculum instruction, so this will be for both K-8 and 9-12, a shared service position. And also, finally, wanted to mention how pleased and wonderful, how pleased I was, and how wonderful it was to see the large numbers of our staff that came to Seussical and brought their kids, and how the big kids danced with the little kids in the aisle repeatedly. And it was a great success. A huge number of high school kids participated in that and did a fantastic job.
Now we have an opportunity for public participation. If anyone in the audience wishes to address the board, please raise your hand to be recognized. Please make your comments from the podium. You know the routine, Mrs. Thorner. Provide your name and address and identify any group that you may be representing here, and please limit your
Nancy
comment to
Thorner,
3.
331 East Blodgett Avenue in Lake Bluff, and I'm just representing myself as a citizen. This is very timely for tonight since you will be discussing Common Core. With the new board in place, I thought it was important to once again express my reservations about Common Core, which is being sold as a state-led initiative that will bring quality education standards to our schools. Nothing could be further from the truth. Instead, the Common Core state standard are an illegal overreach by the Department of Education into our local education. The standards are untested, unproven, and unsupported, both academically and fiscally. Now, Illinois Bill HB 2357 will not allow school districts to discontinue or modify any mandated activity regarding costs to Common Core, thereby ceding the sovereign rights of Illinois. Now, I have 3 handouts that I will be handing out, but I will discuss briefly each of them. The first one is called The Schoolmaster by Dinah Goldstein. It was published in the Atlantic magazine on October the 12th, or 2012. David Coleman was the lead architect of the Common Core standards, yet he has zero K-12 experience in teaching. Should we really be learning how to cook from a person who's ever been in the kitchen? Coleman himself admits that the core will probably lead to a short-term reduction in test scores, but that this is just a necessary hardship on the road towards academic utopia. Now, what is Coleman's utopia? It's where classrooms are intellectually stimulated havens, where dreams of college motivate all students, and where college itself is a smart investment. Yet for many American students, perhaps the majority, that may never be the case. Now, the Article 2 is Common Core Standards. Solutions to Education are just another big government program by Bill Koresh of the Plato Institute. Now, as far as the origin of Common Core, Bill Koresh informs how Common Core was developed by an organization called Achieve and the National Governors Association, both of which were generally funded by the Gates Foundation. It was well understood by states that they would not be eligible for Race to the Top funding, that was $4,335 billion, unless they adopted the Common Core standards. So Common Core is really a federal education program. Koresh then goes on to explain how the federal government is really doing in its meddling in public education. Federal education has increased by 375% in the past since 1978, but math and reading scores have declined accordingly during the same period. Most worrisome is that the nationalizing of education via Common Core is about promoting an agenda of anti-capitalism, white guilt, global citizenship, effective math rising from feelings and emotions, and cultural sensitivity for spelling and language. This is done in the name of consciousness raising, moral relativity, fairness, diversity, and multiculturalism. Finally, the last article, Indiana reconsiders Common Core by Britton and Corina of the Heritage Foundation. I might say that there are now 12 states that are considering withdrawal from Common Core, and that's also your state, Superintendent Stamick. Michigan is one of them. Question is whether the very content taught in schools should be made by bureaucrats in Washington instead of those people closest to the students, parents, and teachers. Brittany goes on to say that while the loss of educational liberty is the greatest threat posed by Common Core, educational spending is also likely to increase. According to the Pioneer Institute for Public Research, the total cost for states to implement the standards, that is through the whole United States, is $16 billion over the next 7 years. The cost for Illinois will be $733 million. Was an Illinois cost analysis conducted? I don't think so. And how will Illinois pay for their massive cost in education, new books and everything else? I've said it all, and now you have to consider. I'll give you the articles to read, and also something that is going around in Illinois. It's a way to stop Common Core, and it's on the agenda of many people now here in Illinois, and you will see how it's being done.
Thank you, Mrs. Thorner. Further public participation?
Thank you. I would suggest that you have two opportunities for speakers, one at the beginning and one at the end. I had something to say based on the meeting that was last week, and I didn't have an opportunity to speak. As we all know, this is a micro school. It means tiny, one school, one bureaucracy, and basically in Highland Park, many years ago in the 1930s, one teacher and a group of students built schools as part of classroom projects. They learned a lot about business, they learned a lot about how to build a building, and some of them made careers out of that. All schools now have the capability, because they have teachers who teach website making. It would have been very simple to have a class project making the website for the school. That way, you would save $50,000 in cost, and the person who proposed and organized it, you could eliminate that salary also. That's $250,000, and I think that would be worthwhile doing. We taxpayers are paying way too much You've got one guy who just retired as your superintendent, and now the whole state, the poor people downstate, have to subsidize his pension. I don't think that's reasonable. For example, it cost, roughly speaking, $43,000 for somebody to go to school here per year. Doesn't include books and that sort of thing, but it's what it costs taxpayers, being the people downstate or the people here. That means a classroom of 20 students would cost, roughly speaking, $830,000. If you subtract $100,000 for the teacher, $20,000 for other things such as the room, electricity, and the heating for that room, you've got a lot of money left over. It's an awful lot of money, like $740,000, that's being wasted on other activities. At least you can consider now doing something about that $740,000. You don't need another principal, that's for sure. You have a superintendent who can substitute as principal as well. It's one school. And you have a little kindergarten school also for grade school. It's still not significant. These are micro school districts. You don't need the bureaucracy. You can save it. Don't cut the teachers. They're needed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to address the board? Moving on, we've got a report on the Common Core state standards. Dr. Cooley.
Good evening, board members, and welcome to all our new members. We appreciate your service to our community. So I'm just going to do a little introduction here, and I brought a couple people with me to help with this presentation. Tom Maher, the department chair for the math department at the high school. He has 15 years of experience in teaching, and the last 5 of those as our department chair. And then Kristen Carlson, I'm pleased to introduce all of you to her. She is going to be coming new to the high school. She has 20 years of experience in the classroom teaching English and 4 years as a department chair in Grays Lake Central High School, and she'll be the new English department chair come fall. And I know she's done a lot of work in her district on the Common Core standards, so I'm pleased to have her with us tonight. So just what we're going to cover here tonight, you can see listed a little bit of everything to give you a little basis of information. There is a wealth of information on the on different websites, including our own State Board of Education website. So I'll encourage you to ask questions as you've done, and ask Mr. Simic, who is quite well versed in the Common Core standards, or any of us should you have more questions. But this is what we'll be covering tonight. In 2009 is when the National Association of Governors had requested that work be done on these Common Core standards, so that across states, when students move from state to state, they would be best prepared for colleges and careers. The Council of Chief State School Officials were also part of that process. It included teachers, parents, school administrators, and experts all contributed to this, to the project. The literature shows that the federal government was not involved in the creating of these standards, but it came across the states. And each state had an opportunity to adopt or not adopt these standards. And as you know, 45 have adopted the Common Core standards, which have identified the essential skills and knowledge that we will focus on, but also create processes for students to learn and work with and problem solve across all the subjects. We have standards for math and English language arts, but the literacy standards apply across the content areas. And we've been working on these kinds of things in terms of the literacy requirements for many, many years, trying to have common approaches to helping struggling readers and other best practices regarding reading. So we will focus on that more with the Common Core standards, but it won't be a very big shift in terms of history, social studies, and science, and even in the technical subjects. So we're going to go on. I'll turn it over to Kristen.
So a portrait of Common Core standard, state standard students. It's not about students anymore doing rote memorization or recitation of facts. Rather, it's about students becoming effective consumers of information. It's about students becoming strategic problem solvers. Traditionally, in classrooms, we've operated as silos. Students go from their math classes to their English classes to their social studies classes to their science classes. Rarely do we ask them to transfer their knowledge and skills. The Common Core State Standards are asking the students to apply their learning in one subject area and adapt it and mutate it to another subject area. For the anchor standards, for K through 12, there are reading and writing standards, the listening and speaking standards, and then the language standards. Most of the focus right now is on the reading and writing standards. Those are the standards PARCC assessments address. The reading standards are central because the Common Core State Standards ask every teacher in a building to be responsible for every student's literacy. It's just that literacy looks different in each subject area. I think when we first started talking about Common Core State Standards and literacy, a lot of teachers thought that it meant that they had to, pass out textbooks or novels or articles. Rather, it's about students learning to read text and define text in different ways. Standard 1 and 10 are usually the focus. Standard 1 is about students citing textual evidence and making textually supported inferences. And then Standard 10 is about all students reading complex texts.
Looks like my turn with the math. Again, to add to emphasis to what Kristen had said about the new Common Core State Standards, emphasize process in addition to the content standards. And so there's two set of standards for mathematics. There's a mathematical practice. We've listed 3 examples of 8. There's a total of 8 mathematical practice standards. And again, the first one listed there, make sense of problems and persevere in problem solving. Again, not about content, but again, how do we go about teaching kids to do mathematics? And of course, then there are a large list of content standards. Currently, there's much discussion about whether a school should go a traditional path, which is your typical mathematics program, Algebra 1 as a freshman, Geometry, Algebra 2, or should a school go an integrated pathway, which is similar to the European model, where there's a mixture of both algebra and geometry in that first year. And then, again, there's a Math 1, Math 2, Math 3. The current proposed state of which the pathways is it's left to individual schools in the state of Illinois to choose which path they're going to go in delivering that content to the students. A large portion of, again, the Common Core State Standards is the new assessment process. And the state of Illinois is currently working with the PARCC, which is an organization that's writing the tests that are proposed to be used at the end of the 9th through 11th grade. So that's very different than our current state testing system, which only occurs at the end of the 11th grade. Currently, these next 2 slides that I'm going to show are all about the proposed plan right now. Okay, there's 2 assessments proposed. There is a performance-based assessment about 75% of the way through the school year, approximately in April, and then there's a summative assessment at the end of the year. And again, I think the other main point of the 2 more points about this particular the assessment is that one is the proposed idea is that all the tests are completed on computer so that then results can be turned around in about 2 weeks. And the first administration of this new test is proposed to be in the spring of 2015. Again, this slide provides a timeline of the amount of time spent for these tests. And again, I think to highlight all of the information, there's just short of 10 hours of testing, both for the both in the English and in the mathematics standards. And again, you're thinking about every freshman through junior year. So the testing will be much more significant starting in 2015 if the proposed plan holds. And then how does this impact Lake Forest High School? Okay, So some of the vocabulary that the Common Core uses to, again, we're talking about more about process versus content, and close reading of challenging texts, both literary and informational texts, as the kids deal with the information that they're receiving off of the internet. And again, as you can see, they're gathering information and writing arguments, again, both in mathematics and in English in their science classes, putting together arguments and doing proofs in addition just to writing essays and what they've always traditionally done. Also, the state standards align with 21st century learning curriculum that's often commonly mentioned. Again, students taking information, synthesizing it, and adding to their information. How does this affect teachers? Again, pedagogy in the classroom will change, is their hope to change. And one of the big things that I'd like to address is breadth versus depth of curriculum. Again, the concept in literature on the internet and throughout is that the United States public education system has a very wide range of curriculum, and that we're very shallow versus other models, European or Asian models. Fewer content areas, but much more enriched, deep learning. And so then again, this idea is that there's less content coverage. However, we should add to that a much more in-depth coverage and understanding for the students so they have better retention over time. Again, more reading, more writing, more student-centered activities, more students, again, summarizing what they've learned in the classroom. And so a very different process that'll affect how the teachers teach. Okay. Let's see here. And I'm gonna go back to have Kristen come back, please. Thank you.
And I think Tom just said it really well. The students really do the work when you're talking about the Common Core standards as the guideline. Rather than students sitting passively and becoming kind of receptacles of information, which does address that shallow coverage Tom just mentioned. The kids are digging in, they're being active, they are engaged in inquiry, and the teachers are just facilitating that process, providing strategies, allowing the students the means to adapt and mutate those strategies so that they can use them effectively. And at the end, that's what critical thinkers and critical problem solvers do.
I'd like to add, let's see, let's go. There you go. I think the good news is that the District 115 has already started a number of strategies to address these changes in the pedagogy. There's much professional development for the teachers to do and to continue doing. They're investigating best practice in instruction. We currently have a formative and summative feedback PLC, professional learning community, addressing, again, the feedback is from John Hattie's visible learning as one of the most effective ways to improve student achievement. Our new teacher evaluation process is designed after the Charlotte Danielson evaluation framework, and so addressing very much content, the process of learning in class. And a recent a key goal in the list of board goals relates specifically to 21st century learning. And so the district is ahead of the ball game as far as understanding and addressing the needs of the Common Core state standards.
And this quote kind of sums up the meaning of Common Core, or the intent of Common Core. Essentially, it doesn't matter how many books kids read, or how many math problems that they solve, or how many vocabulary words that they learn. It's about what skills they're acquiring, what strategies they're acquiring, and then how they use them. It's interesting, Mr. Burgener said at the beginning when he was talking about the focus on kids and making sure that kids are equipped to face the challenges of the real world. That's really what Common Core is about. It's about transcending the classroom, that it doesn't matter just what's happening within the classroom, but how the kids take that information and those skill sets outside of the classroom. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Kristen or Tom, is there anything you don't like about Common Core that if you could change or fix it, what would it be?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So you hear of that's why I mentioned it was a proposed plan, because I go to conferences and you hear proposed ideas on one, what is the assessment going to look like? What are they referring to with these math standards? And so there's a lot of unknown and there's a lot of changes. So that's something that I find difficult because the teachers ask, you know, what are we changing to? What are we actually improving? And there are some nice examples to provide for them some guidance and leadership, but in other ways there's a lot of uncertainty. Do you have anything to add about that?
A point of clarification, because this is so often confused. This is not a curriculum, correct? These are standards, but it's still up to us to develop our curriculum in order to help our students achieve the standards. Is that right?
That's true. I think that's a wonderful statement. I'm glad that you reminded me of that because as I mentioned, in the content standards that they provide really only go through Algebra 2 and a little bit into pre-calculus. And that's a wonderful thing for the national, you know, the national perspective. But here in our particular community, as many of you know, approximately 60% of our kids get to a calculus class. So we're beyond what these standards are promoting for us. And so specifically in the math department, we are balancing between what are the requirements for the AP curriculum, the Common Core state standards, and also making sure our students are successful in ACT testing. So those are different perspectives that we pay attention to. But again, our curriculum is very different and not just doing a checklist of content. That's very correct.
And Kristen, in English, we're still deciding what works of literature our students are studying and so on, right?
Yes, we still make those decisions. The Common Core doesn't dictate any of the literature or any of the informational texts. It's just asking us to consider these standards as we choose the literature to make sure that the students can achieve or at least make progress toward these standards with the text that we choose.
Any other questions or comments?
When you look at the slide about what we're asking students to do, to read, collaborate, analyze, write, and communicate, to use technology to do so, and depth versus breadth, and encouraging collaboration, inquiry-based learning, student-centered instruction. Can you talk about how the Danielson framework fits in with that? And the Danielson framework is something that the district has implemented just recently here. And also, one of the questions is, what is the difference between formative and summative feedback, if you would?
Okay. Well, the first question is related to how does the Danielson model relate to what we're asking our students to do in the future. An excellent teacher, which we hope that all of our teachers strive toward, make the students the center of the classroom. The students get involved in actually initiating discussion and even lead discussion. Even in the classroom management piece, the students are involved with helping to create a productive learning environment. And so the Danielson model provides a vision, an example of what an excellent teacher would look like. And it is also very closely connected with the student-centeredness of these classes, of students providing information in the classroom. In the second question, oh gosh, Mr. Summick, if you could, again, give me
the difference between formative and
okay.
summative feedback.
Formative feedback is something that happens very regularly in order to help a student. Again, if you're shooting, that's an analogy, playing a piano or shooting a free throw. If a player that's on a free throw line and shooting free throws during practice and they miss, it doesn't cost the student anything, but they get the feedback of how they did in their shot. The same way if you're practicing playing a piano. If you're playing a piano and the piece sounds correct in practice, you get that feedback and the student can adjust. Versus in a game, now that player, there's a downside if the player misses. And that summative assessment is at the end, which then provides an actual measure of performance at the end of the learning process. Okay?
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Next on the agenda are board committee reports. I think I already know the answer to these questions, but Board Education Committee, Nicki Snoblin.
The Education Committee has not met since our last board meeting.
Got one right. And Board Finance and Operations Committee, Dick Block.
You do know the answer to this question. The Finance and Operations Committee has not met. I'm the only board member as we currently sit. I can schedule a
You
meeting
better
in
get
my
busy
convenience.
then.
Especially. Mrs. Fowler told me I had to ask those questions, so there you go. Liaison reports, there are none, so we move on to action items. The first is approval of the GCA renewal.
And I'd like to defer to Mr. Albus on this. And I think there's a little bit of lead-up knowledge into how we arrived at this recommendation.
GCA's been in the district, gosh, I'm not even sure, longer than I've been, and that's been since 2006. They're a contracted cleaning service that we utilize. In 2009, as stated in Carol White's cover memo, a bid was done and a contract was awarded to GCA for a one-year period from September of '09 through June 30th of 2010. The contract allows for an annual renewal of up to 4 additional one-year terms. GCA has been a very good partner with the district. Several years ago, when we were looking to cut cost extensively, we went to them with a proposal to reduce our cost by $100,000 by going to a rolling cleaning schedule on classrooms. They came back and said, let's not, the rolling schedule would mean classrooms would get cleaned 4 out of 5 nights. On the 5th night, simply empty the trash. They came back and said, let's not do that. We'll clean all the classrooms every night, but we want some more latitude on when we do some of the other functions around the building. So if the weather's nice and kids are not tracking in mud, we'll make a visual assessment, maybe not buff the floor that night. When the weather's bad and they are tracking in, then that will become a priority. So we agreed to that, and we did not see a significant drop-off in the quality of the service, and we did achieve the savings that we were looking for. So they have been a very good partner. They're asking for a 2% increase for next year, which is below, as we often talk about CPI as measured for the Property Tax Extension Limitation Act is 3% for next year. So we felt that that was reasonable, and that's why it's before you tonight for your consideration.
Any questions for Mr. Albus?
Alan, what's the total dollar amount of this contract?
I'm going to say, I think it's about $800,000.
Is that for both districts or just the high school?
I'd have to look that up, and I could do that quickly, but I'm trying to do that from the top of my head.
The contract hasn't been put out for competitive bidding for quite some time, 5 years, I guess, or 4 years. We made some major restructuring changes that you just mentioned. I remember some time ago when we still had the Operations Committee functioning. Was that at the inception of this contract, or was that later in it?
That was during this contract. That was during.
During, it wasn't in '09, '10, it was subsequent to that? For some reason, I thought it was about that time.
I want to say it was in 10 or 11 that we went to them, probably 10.
Do you have any feel for what the market has done in the last 3 or 4 years in this arena relative to what we're paying? I mean, I presume you don't have a sense that the market has tightened, or that there's a competitive disadvantage to us not going out for bids here?
We have not gotten a sense that that market has changed significantly, but in addition to that, this is a company now, because of the time they've been here, knows the buildings, knows our operations and knows our services and does a very good job. So that has to be factored into it as well. But if we had a sense that the market had changed and they were now out of line with the market, we would have recommended not doing a renewal and going out to bid.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just one question. You mentioned the contract runs September 1st, I believe, through June 30th. Do we mothball the building for the July, August, or?
Fair question. No, the first one did from September of '09 through June 30th of 2010, and then it allowed for 4 one-year renewals after that.
If there are no other questions, can I have a motion to approve this contract renewal?
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the CGA renewal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? If no further discussion, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Schreiber?
Here.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Burgener?
Aye. Motion is carried. Next, we move on to the approval of the Honeywell Instant Alert Contract.
Again, I will defer to Mr. Albus or Mrs. Hermes on this one. Mrs. Hermes. And also like to thank Mrs. Whipple for some very astute negotiations on this contract.
Pretty sure they're going to be paying us to take their service by next year. You can see before you, we do have the renewal for the Honeywell Instant Alert System. For those of you that are parents, this would be that very, very rare day that you get the call that perhaps school was canceled due to inclement weather. We also are able to use the system for any other messaging. You know, if we have a late bus, or let's say we have a sewer issue maybe at Sheridan School, all these things that have occurred during the year. So these are the text messaging, the voice, and also email. It will trigger all of those once we put the system into action. We've had them since at least 06, 07. As you can see, we have reduced our price year over year. We pay on a per pupil basis. We're down this year to $1.50 a child for this service. It's unlimited service. So if Mr. Simic would like to call 3 snow days next year, he could use it all 3 of those times at the same cost. And we were at $2.20 for students last year. We were as high as $3.50 on the initial contracts. I did go out and I do survey Lake County a little bit to see what everyone else is paying, to see if we're still in the market. I did get a quick response back from about 16 other schools in Lake County. There's only one other school that next year will be paying a little less than we are. However, it's with a service that no one else is with. So we will let them take that test case at $1 per student. Everyone else is above us with the exception of 2 schools. So I think that we have a very competitive rate. They continue to provide a really good service for when we need them. Any questions? I'm happy to entertain.
No, I'd like to commend you, Ms. Hermes, on the completeness of the information you provided to allow the board to make this decision with a feeling that we have the whole context of the decision. So thank you.
Great. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick comment. You did mention you can break it down by even bus. It is pretty simple. I know it'd be relatively simple to, cancel school, to just let, parents know one bus is running.
We do have the ability to tie it into, we can feed information right from our Power School, which is our student database, into the Instant Alert system. We have had a little bit of a hiccup this year with that. We need to make sure that the bus information gets loaded in the right box, but then we can trigger it by school, by bus if the bus is late. So we did run into an issue, not at the high school district, but at the elementary this year, that noticed that there was some of those boxes that weren't filled out. So we've addressed that on the personnel side.
And
Yes.
we actually did have cause to, we had a bus that had an issue, and we had to contact the remaining students on the bus through their parents. We were able to notify them. So that is a feature that we actually have used in just recent weeks here.
there's no other questions or comments, can I have a motion to approve the Honeywell Instant Alert contract, please?
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the Honeywell Instant Alert contract as presented.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? If there's not, can I please have a roll call?
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Schreiber?
Aye.
Mr. Burgener?
Aye. Motion is carried. We move on to approval of the proposed 2014 to 2015 school calendar.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burgener. This is actually a collaboration with 3 districts. Thor Benson is the point person on this. This is a 65, 67, and 115 ongoing collaboration. And this is Mr. Benson's proposed calendar for this coming school year. This is then sent to the ROE, and then it documents our participation, and we must have a certain number of days and a certain number of institute days and whatnot, and there's a great deal of scrutiny that goes into this.
Any questions about the calendar? No questions. Can I have a motion to approve the proposed calendar for 2014-15?
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the 2014-2015 calendar as presented.
Second.
If there's no discussion, may I please have a roll call?
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Schreiber?
Aye.
Mr. Black?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Burgener?
Aye. The motion is carried. Next, we move on to the approval of the Michigan State University contract.
Thank you, Mr. Burgener. This is an agreement between us and Michigan State University. Happy to see some proud alums in the audience here. This is a remarkably good deal for our district, as we engage a Mandarin teacher by semester for significantly less than we would otherwise pay for a teacher that we were to engage without MSU.
This contract has been in place for how many years?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yes, this is definitely not the first year, although the contract, I would point out, as I did last time, we consider this contains a paucity of information about what services are provided. To that end, I guess I'd like to know how much are we contracting for? There's a separate charge quoted for instructional services, and have to find it here. Anyway, it wasn't clear to me, exactly what we were contracting for.
I would just jump in and comment. I had no idea what this was when I read it. So there was nothing in here about a Mandarin program in the information that was provided. So a little more information would be helpful.
Fair enough. This is, what this is, we have a Mandarin teacher at the high school, for clarity's sake. Have a Mandarin teacher at the high school. The contract is for $22,500, and for those of you who have not been or not yet familiar with this program, Michigan State works with Chinese universities or with individuals, and then contracts them. They have Han-Ban, that is a Chinese governmental organization that offsets some of the cost for this. So for $22,500, the district effectively gets a Mandarin teacher for a semester, which is a great deal less than what we would pay if we were to go out on the market and hire a teacher on our contract schedule. And please pardon the lack of introduction of that issue in your materials.
Well, with regard to the compensation, it states that we will pay the Confucius Institute a total of $22,500 for the services of the Confucius Institute, and for each of the instructional consultants rendering services under this agreement doesn't say how many consultants might be involved. I presume that 22.5 is additive. If you had, in other words, if you had one consultant, it would be 22.5 to the Confucius Institute and another 22.5 for the consultant, the way I read it, but.
This is actually for one, and anybody, Mr. Albus or others that are perhaps more familiar with this, feel free to chime in. This is for one teacher. We have one Mandarin teacher at the high school that we engage through the use of this contract. So if we were to have more, we could then expand the use of this contract for that, for those purposes, is my understanding. Is that correct, Mrs. Hermes? Yes.
So it is not additive. It's not 22.5 to the institute and then 22.5 for each consultant.
Correct. This is 22.5 for the one teacher. Total. So the total expenditure for the Mandarin program per semester for the Board of Education is 22.5.
I believe this is the third year we've contracted with them for this service, and it's essentially the same contract that we did approve last year.
You know, just on the surface, I would think that I'm far from the expert here. It's probably a great program. Section 9 doesn't say what you just said from what I've read. I think Dick and I may be aligned. Maybe it's just a typo or a wording. But I've kind of interpreted it the same way Dick did.
I'm reading it as 22.5 for the services of the institute and for each of the consultants. So for each one consultant plus the services, it will cost 22.5 per semester. We will have one teacher, so we will get the services and one teacher for 22.5. If we were to add a teacher, it would be double that amount, 45.
Well, again, for the record, assuming we want to renew this in the future, I think it would be helpful if we included some description in the agreement as to what was being provided, and, you know, the number and the total cost that the contract was designed to cover.
And it is the district's decision how many consultants we will engage, not the institute's, correct?
Correct, and that's based on students voting with their feet in this case. So if we did not have enrollment, we would not be engaging a teacher for this purpose. So this is, it really gives us a great deal of flexibility in terms of how we're going to provide those services, and effectively at what cost as well.
If there are no other questions for Mr. Simic, can
I have one quick question. Just with the expenses while the teachers are here, are we paying any living expenses? Or is this 22.5 and then they pick it up on their own, or the institute takes care of that?
Mrs. Hermes is more familiar with this than I.
Certainly not my area of expertise, but I do listen a little bit in the office. There are some costs that were associated with offsetting some rent associated with the Mandarin teachers. Now, I don't know the breakdown off the top of my head between 67 and 115. Any support in the area of rent would discontinue once they had completed their work at MSU. So these teachers who are enrolled in that MSU program, once they have finished that, and I think it's a 2 or 3 year program, will become part of our regular teaching staff. So then they would come on the books in accordance with all the LFEA contracts and agreements, just like they would a normal teacher. So there would be no subsidized rent at that point.
But there is initially.
I don't know if it's 67 or 115, but yes.
Somebody pays.
Jointly answering yes, there has been. We don't, kind of maybe to answer your early question, consultant versus MSU, the only check that we cut is to MSU. So we do not make any checks, cut any checks to them for their services. They're paid from MSU.
I have a motion to approve the MSU contract, please.
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the MSU contract as presented.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? If not, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Schreiber?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Aye. Next is the approval of the Human Resources Report. Mr. Simic.
Yeah, I recommend that the Human Resources Report be approved as presented.
Is there a motion?
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the Human Resources Report as presented.
Second.
Any discussion or questions about the Human Resources Report? May I have a roll call then?
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Schreiber?
Aye.
Mr. Burgener?
Aye. Motion is carried. We move on to the consent agenda. If any member would like an item removed, please speak, or if there are any items that anyone would like to discuss. If not, the consent agenda includes approval of disbursements, payrolls, and financial statements for April 2013, minutes of a joint board workshop held on April 17th, 2013, minutes of a regular meeting held on April 9th, 2013, minutes of an executive session held on April 9th, 2013, minutes of a special meeting held on May 1st, 2013, minutes of a special meeting held on May 7th, 2013, minutes of a joint board workshop held on May 9th, 2013, approval of declaration and disposal of surplus item, and disposal of audio recordings. I have a motion.
I move that the Lake Forest High School District 115 Board of Education approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Mr. Powers?
Aye.
Mr. Mormon?
Aye.
Mr. Schreiber?
Aye.
Mrs. Snoblin?
Aye.
Mr. Burgener?
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we have Freedom of Information requests. We had 3 in the last month, one from Elena Windsor from Lake Forest, Illinois, the second also from Elena Windsor from Lake Forest, Illinois, and the third from Research Choices, LLC in Austin, Texas. Finally, we have announcements, and I'd like to thank Mr. Thiel for taking the bulk of that off my plate this opening night. 2 things to add. Amongst all of the activities, there is a day off for Memorial Day on Monday, May 27th, and our next meeting of the Board of Education will be held on June 11th, 2013. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned.